To my mind, one of the most spectacular examples of taking an important food and converting it to a form that I feel very comfortable using is a cooperative called Amul. That's spelled A-M-U-L. And I'll talk actually a little bit more about the name because it has some meaning and connotation in India. But Amul is the biggest dairy cooperative in the world and one of the biggest cooperatives of any sort in the world. It's certainly the biggest system in the world producing milk. And it would help to know that India is the biggest dairy producing and consuming country in the world today. What's nice about Amul and the dairy cooperatives that it has spawned is that it has managed to take a very, very difficult situation back in the 1950s and 60s of tens and hundreds of thousands of individual dairy farmers. Think of a poor, emaciated man with one cow trying desperately to get some milk and distributing it to his immediate hinterland. Doesn't sound very appealing, doesn't sound sanitary, doesn't sound like it would be subject to modern techniques of pasteurization and things of that nature. But Amul has managed to aggregate hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of these dairy farmers into a system that daily produces fabulous high-quality milk at extremely affordable prices to tens and hundreds of millions of Indian consumers. That's the story that I want to tell because it's an act of incredible entrepreneurship that's unfolded and continues to unfold over the last several decades. And it really addresses one of the most elemental societal health issues, which is getting clean, safe milk from one place to another in a way that was not feasible before Amul showed up. And to benchmark its importance, we can think of two different ways. If you ask anybody who has lived in India for a while or grew up in India, as I did, what are some of the iconic brands that they can remember? I think right up there within the top, probably the top brand, if not the top two or three, would be Amul. It's something that you see every day. There are billboards, and I want to talk about the billboard advertising campaign because it's one of the most important pieces of this Amul story. You see it every day, and it changes. It's the longest running, successful outdoor billboard campaign in the world, having lasted more than 50 years. So Amul will be right up there at the top of things. If you ask people who are the most inspiring personalities in India the last 50 or 60 years, within the top 10 would be the father of the milk revolution, the so-called white revolution in India. His name is Verghese Kurian, a Syrian Christian from the southern Indian state of Kerala, who accidentally stumbled onto the plight of dairy farmers and came up with the system that has now become the world's biggest dairy producer. So Verghese Kurian will be right up there. And I want to tell you his story also, because it's quite an inspirational story and a very practical story because it addresses a lot of the institutional limitations that would have otherwise prevented us from being able to consume cheap, high-quality, sanitized milk. So one way to understand the importance of Amul is to just ask anybody and say, unaided recall, as the marketing guys would tell us, is extremely high for Verghese Kurian, even though he's moved on from the scene for quite some time. And unaided awareness for Amul is even higher. The second way I'm struck with is to compare to what's actually unfolding in China right now. Many of you will have remembered the 2008 melamine milk crisis, where literally tens of thousands of Chinese children and babies were fed contaminated milk. Why? Because many of the dairy companies allegedly were complicit in engaging in some very unethical and illegal behavior. They were trying to misrepresent the quality of the milk by adding a protein called melamine into the milk. Apparently, melamine is something that the existing dairy tests were not detecting, but it appears to boost the protein content, the apparent protein content of the milk. And so it allows the dairy farmer to get away by diluting the milk with water. So he has to use less actual milk. And he compensates for the reduction in protein content by adding this contaminant, melamine, which makes it look as though the protein content has gone back up. And that turned out to be, in a simplified sense, really what was going on. And unfortunately ended up killing a lot of children and damaging the organs of many other kids until the Chinese state figured this out. And after trying to see if they could paper over the system for a little while, realized that the problem was so systemic that they went ahead and began to try to intervene. But 6 years later, the problem still hasn't gone away. And in a sense, I mention that because here is an equivalently populous country with an equivalent potential for using safe, high-quality milk. And indeed, the demand is massive now in China, even though traditionally they haven't been very much of a milk-drinking society. But today you can see people getting caught for smuggling milk out of Heathrow and Hong Kong and being told by the Hong Kong and the London authorities that they're not allowed to carry milk to China anymore because it's reducing the stocks in London and Hong Kong. And you can see wealthy Chinese importing milk. Or you can see all my Chinese students at Harvard, every time they go back to China, they have suitcases full of powdered milk. So the demand is there, but there's no institutional system in China to meet the need for high-quality, safe milk. Yet Amul has done this 50 or 60 years ago. And one of the things I want us to reflect on also in this is whether solutions that are created in some part of the world can transfer over. And that's actually a fairly complicated question, so hopefully we'll get to that.